Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today I have had a certain song on my mind, and you know what that means? We're going to probably play that song and talk a little bit about some of the lyrics. It's actually the song Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell. And just recently heard her perform that at the Newport Folk Festival. And it's been going through my mind for the last few days. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because I think, most people in this world see things only from one side. And when we only see the world from one side, a lot of times what you find out is you might be wrong. And so I want to go through and talk a little bit more about that in this episode today. So stay tuned and we will roll that episode now. All right. Well, before we get into today's episode formally, I just wanted to do, it's been a little while since I've done some solo episodes. And so I want to make sure and do some call outs for some people who have left reviews recently on the podcast. Yeah. Did you know you can actually leave a review? And I would love you to leave a 5-star review and actually type something into it as well. So let's get on with that. So Greg Hutt, so it comes through as usernames, but Greg said, great podcast, covers personal and professional topics. It's fun, entertaining, and practical. Must listen episode. So Greg, thank you for that. We also had Goddess Lulu, I think is how you would say that, Lylou. So a little shout out to all the people who have left reviews, but she said, strong, supportive, safe. This is how Jason makes you feel. His compassion through storytelling on his podcast is unique and compelling. So Goddess Lulu, thank you. That's exactly what I am trying to make you feel here, is strong, supportive, and safe. Champion wrote in and said, great, boost confidence with this podcast. So again, thank you for that. And finally today, I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, but hopefully you'll know who you are when you're listening. Guarathasani said, great source of knowledge. This is a great podcast to gain confidence and internal strength. So again, thank you to everybody who has left a review. If you have not done that yet, please go out to the Apple podcast page and leave us a review. You can click the stars for, how many stars to give you. So appreciate if you think this is a great podcast, if you give us a 5-star review. And also it just helps me if you take the extra, 30 seconds and actually type out something for me, because I appreciate getting the feedback to make sure that I'm doing what needs to be done here on the podcast. Okay. So let's jump into today's episode. And as I mentioned before, I want to talk a little bit today about the song Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell. And this is a song that Joni wrote back, I believe, in 1969. So a little while ago, over 50 years ago, I guess that would be 53 years, something like that. And when she wrote this song, she was still a young woman. Okay, I think she was in her mid to late 20s at the time, and it's one of her most famous songs. You've probably heard it before. You'll recognize it when I start playing it, if you don't, just from the title of it. But it's a very interesting song, and what I'll tell you is I've got a lot of respect for Joni Mitchell. She is, in my opinion, one of the greatest singer-songwriters that we have had in this last century. In fact, a lot of her music itself, it had commercial success, but a lot of people actually covered many of the songs that she did. And so sometimes some of the songs that she wrote were actually made more popular by other people. Like, one of the songs that I really love, Woodstock, that she wrote, the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young version of Woodstock is actually the one that most people know. It's my favorite, just the way it is, but I'm a big CSNMY fan as well. But one of the things, again, and so here's a little backstory on this. So So Joni is no longer a young woman, right? She is towards the end of her life at this point. And in fact, several years ago, she had some health problems and has actually not performed publicly in many years. I want to say it's like been somewhere between 9 to 15 years that she has not performed publicly. And so just recently, she was at the Newport Folk Festival. And for those of you familiar with music, that is one of the premier festivals around from a music perspective. That's the one where Bob Dylan pulled out the electric guitar and everybody freaked out. It's had a lot of really, really good acts and things that have come through there over the years. But so just recently was another Newport Folk Festival, and Joni Mitchell was on the lineup. And so I just recently watched the video that somebody had taken. It's kind of gone viral, so you might have seen the video as well. But you know, it was Joni up on stage, you know, sitting in a chair with some other artists around her, kind of supporting and doing a little background while she sang Both Sides Now. And what I will tell you is, you know, the energy that I felt from listening to her sing this song towards the end of her life. Because what we find is, you know, the longer that we live, the more we kind of understand and see life in some different ways that maybe we didn't when we were younger, right? And a lot of that is because, again, as we have these life experiences, we realize, or hopefully we realize, that we don't really realize as much or know as much as we think we know, right? The older you get, the more that you actually know, the more you realize, the less you know, right? That's one of the conundrums. Now, I know that you understand that, you know that because you're a listener here on the podcast, but I will tell you that most of the world only sees things from one way. They believe that they are right. They fight for their position. They tell everybody else who doesn't believe the same way that they do that those other people are wrong. They're full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. Okay. And I know you know what I'm talking about from, you know, watching the news and media and seeing things on social media as well, that so many people are actually blinded and can only see things from one side. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this song today and talk a little bit more about it. So I'm going to go ahead and play it here in just a minute. And then I want to go through and talk about the lyrics. Because what I will tell you is one of the ways, you know, to reduce a lot of stress in your life and to be successful is when you can actually understand and see things from more than one point of view. Because like I said, most of the time, you know, there'll be some trigger that happens in your life, and you'll react or respond in a certain way, and you think that you know, the way that you're interpreting it is the only way that there is. And a lot of times you'll hold on to that attachment, you'll fight for it, you'll fight other people, and at the end of the day, a lot of times we're actually wrong. And there's two sides to every story. You know, I don't know if you've seen there's a social media meme, you know, picture that's been posted out there quite a bit that I've seen. And so imagine that there's two stick figures and they're standing, there's a number 6 that is written on the ground, but they're both standing at the top and the bottom of it. So to the one person, it looks like a 6, and to the other person, it looks like a 9. And, you know, how much of the time if you're only looking at it from that one side, you might argue and say, no, it's a 6. You're totally wrong. You don't know what you're seeing. Where from the other person's point of view, they might be saying, no, it's a 9. I can see that it is a 9 and you are the one who is wrong. Well, what if both were actually correct? What if both things could be true? And again, because, you know, in this life, really, it's not an either or, it's usually an and. And people perceive things in different ways because we all have different experiences. You know, if I'm standing on the one side of that 6, maybe it looks like a 6 to me. But if I move my attention, if I look from both sides and I move myself to the other side of that image, I can say, oh, I can understand now why you see that as a 9. And again, hopefully, again, you're reading in between the lines, folks, because that's the way I kind of do it here. But, one of the things from a relationship standpoint is, usually the other person has some point of view that needs to be viewed. Because if we don't, right, we may not be able to understand them. We may not communicate well with them. And so that's why, like I said, I want to get in and talk a little bit more about this. So okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play now. Now, Joni has a much higher voice than I do. And so, I've had to kind of change the key a little bit to play it. And of course, she throws an F sharp minor in there, which is a fun little chord to try to, progress to with some of the other chords that are in this. But here we go. I'm just going to play it. I want you to just kind of go through and listen to the words. We're going to go back and talk about it. But the fact that you're listening right now means there's something in this song that you need to hear today. It may or may not be exactly what it is that I'm talking about, but just listen to it with an open mind. Think about it from both sides and see how the message and the lyrics from this particular song, what they mean for you today, what they mean for you this week. And like I said, we'll go through and talk about it, and I'll prompt you a little bit. But the main thing is for you to figure out, what can you do with this, and how can this help you to be able to change your life, change the life of people around you, and make your life better because you've actually been listening to this. So here we go. Because there's all the unediting, and because I'm not really set up in the full recording studio thing here in my office the way it is, this is what it is. Here we go. Flows and flows and angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done. Clouds got in my way. Looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel, and every fairy tale comes real. I've looked at love that way. Now it's just another show. You leave them laughing when they go, and if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love illusions I recall. I really don't know love at all. Tears and fears and feeling proud to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circle crowds, I've looked at life that way. But now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads, They say I've changed. Something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win or lose, and still somehow it's life illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. All right, and that was pretty pretty rough and uncut. So on my little iPad here, I actually have the music and the so that I can sing along. And when I was practicing a little bit, did the run through before, I had my iPad in one position, and in the other position found out that my auto scroll was a little too quick. So, but hey, I hope again, it's not. I'm not perfect. That's one of the reasons why I play songs on here for you as well, to realize that you don't have to be perfect to still share and get out there and do stuff. So I made a few mistakes on it, but again, hopefully you could feel the energy coming through from that. And now let's go ahead and get in and talk a little bit about this, okay? Because there are some great lines in this particular song. And she talks about clouds, and I want to talk about that a little bit because, I live in Southern California, and here we have 330 days of sun every single year. That's one of the reasons why I live here, right? Because I like to see the sun every day. We do get clouds in the sky, and sometimes we'll have rain, and sometimes it'll be cloudy all day. But most of the time, the sun comes out. And clouds are a funny thing. They're really kind of water mist that's floating around in the sky. And sometimes it can block out the sun. And sometimes we can sit there and say, I wish those clouds would go away because I'd really like to see the sun. But the sun is always there, even when the clouds may be blocking it. And again, how many times in your life, right, might you have a time when it feels like there are more clouds maybe in your life than there is sun? But you can always remember that the sun is always there. Now, let's talk about clouds again too, right? Because we all need water. What's funny is in here, some of the lines she says, when she's talking about clouds, I've looked at clouds that way, right? As that they're feather canyons everywhere. Because a lot of times, when you look up in the sky, clouds can be very beautiful. In fact, sometimes I'll just take pictures of clouds because it's just amazing the artwork that they make. And sometimes they really have that feathery look to them, and they're just very beautiful. And I've looked at clouds that way myself, and I'm sure that you've probably looked at clouds yourself that way. But what about when they block the sun, right? Because then she says, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. And, a lot of times we love the sun. I love the sun. That's why I live where I live. But we also need rain and we need snow, right? And so we can look at the clouds and say, damn it, get out of the way. I want to see the sun. Or we could choose to be grateful for sometimes the shade that they bring, right? Because sometimes it can be pretty hot when you're standing just in the sun by itself. The clouds can actually cool it off a little bit and make it nicer for us to be outside. But they also bring rain and snow, two things that we actually need, right? And what ends up happening, again, it doesn't rain every day. It doesn't snow every day. In fact, most of the places in the world, the sun shines most of the time. But, how much worse off would we be if it never rained and it never snowed, right? Because, first off, there's a practical thing. We need the moisture, right, to be able to help the plants grow, to have water, so that we can drink, so we can bathe and do all of the things that we need to do that way. And so really we should be very grateful for that snow and the rain that it brings. But also, when there are those cloudy days in your life, how much more grateful are you when the sun actually comes out, right? And there are certain places in the world where the sun doesn't come out very much. And I remember I lived in Germany for a while, and one of the things that some people would do over there is, when it's been really, cloudy and overcast for a long time, and when the sun comes out, people go to the parks and they take their clothes off, right? Because they're grateful for the sun and they want to literally soak up the rays of the sun. So, one of the questions for you to maybe ask is, when you look up in the sky, or you look at what's going on in your life right now, are you grateful if there might be some cloudy or rainy days right now in your life? Or are you viewing that as a negative, and you're wishing that you were somewhere else, right? Because those cloudy days, they end up moving on. And then, when she says, I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's clouds, illusions, I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. And that line, it's clouds, illusions. And so again, as she goes through the song and she talks about love and life in general, there is that line that continues to repeat. I really don't know blank at all, right? I really don't know clouds at all. I really don't know life at all. I really don't know love at all. And as we get older, and again, one of the things that I love so much about watching Joni perform that recently towards the end of her life is, now that she's lived another 52 years or whatever, 53 years of her life, she's experienced clouds and life and love from a lot of different angles that she didn't when she was younger. And so she understands those things much better, but also realizes that we don't know them at all, right? And so next part, she gets in and she starts, talking about love, at that time, and how, moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel, and every fairy tale comes true, right? And a lot of times that's how love, especially romantic love, happens to be portrayed to us, right? I mean, there's movies, romantic comedies, other things like that focus on that side of love. But there's two sides of love as well, right? I mean, yeah, there's all the fun stuff like that and the really romantic stuff, but there's also the side of love where you're caring for someone who is sick, right? You're helping each other get through, challenges that maybe you have. Maybe there's challenges that come up in the relationship. I've been in long-term relationships myself now for almost 30 years. And sometimes it is moons and Junes and Ferris wheels. And sometimes there's disagreements. And sometimes there's illness. And sometimes there's, words that were said that were hurtful and things that you have to work through. But that's all love as well, when you can look at it from both sides, right? Because if you're one of those people who just believes that love is only the Ferris wheel and the romantic comedy, then when the relationship you are in is no longer those things, people tend to want to jump to another relationship like that. And so what happens is people end up jumping from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship. And the minute that it starts to get hard because they don't understand or they're not willing to do the other side of love, they get out. And so, where in your life maybe are you giving up? Are you moving on too quickly because you think everything has to be perfect all the time? And realize that just like the clouds, sometimes there's going to be some of those difficult things that are going to come up in life. Sometimes you're going to have little things that you have to work through. And are you willing to stick it out and actually do the work to get through and actually see love from both sides, right? And again, towards the end, as she's talking here, the last verse really kind of talks about life, right? And tears and fears and feeling proud to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds, I've looked at life that way. But now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads. They say I've changed. Now, again, as you go through life, we all change. And, as we go through life and as we change, we have to navigate. And one of the things that I've talked about before is sometimes the people who were in your life no longer end up in your life. As you change, as they change, as life goes on, there are changes that end up happening, right? But there's nothing wrong with that either. And this is one of my favorite lines, is the next line where it says, but something's lost, but something's gained in living every day, right? Because in every day when we live, we gain something, but we tend to also lose something, because as we're growing, as we're learning, as we're evolving, as we're developing, a lot of times we are changing and we're giving up some of who we used to be. And so sometimes, that's why when people who haven't maybe seen us in a while or that knew us when we were younger say, man, you're kind of a different person than what I remember you being before. And my friends, that's part of life, right? Because as we grow, as we develop, as we change, usually in order to gain something, you have to give up something to gain that, right? So again, if you want to go to the store and you want to buy something, you have to give up money to get that thing, right? If you want to be a different person, you might have to start doing things or give up certain things that you did before in order to gain and become that new person. And again, it's just part of life, right? But to realize that those things are really going on all the time. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing in life is an illusion. And again, in each of the choruses, as she comes back, it's life illusions, I recall. It's cloud illusions, I recall. It's love illusions, I recall, right? Because again, most of the time, everything that we're remembering or how we're experiencing and living life happens to be through that lens that we're actually looking at life through. And it's an illusion. It's our illusion of life, of what's actually happening based on our experiences and the way that we're choosing to see life. Now, to wrap up here, at the end, what I want to talk a little bit about then too is the fact that, it's kind of what I started with of seeing life from different points of view. The people, I work with a lot of people, or I see a lot of people who tend to only see the world one way. They see the world in black and white when there's lots of shades of gray. And in fact, there's lots of colors in between black and white on the spectrum. And the people who tend to be the most miserable in life, the people who are stressed out the most, the people who are unhappy, tend to be those people who actually only view things from one particular way or choose to only believe a certain thing. But most of the things that we believe, most of the things that we do in life are all an illusion. And they are something that we have been indoctrinated into doing because of how we were taught and how we are choosing to listen or look at and listen to the world in our own narrow focus, right? And what we find is, again, as you get older, and this is one of the reasons why I love this song, is you can start to see that there's more than one side to every story. In fact, there's always more than one side to every story. And so, the better you can get at actually looking at life from different ways, the better off that you're going to be, because it's not this way or that way. It can be both as well. And so again, the more that you can start to see things from both sides, the better your relationships will be. And in fact, the better your life will be in general, because honestly, just ask yourself, right? Why do you believe some of the things that you believe? Is it just because that's what you've been taught, or is it something that you actually believe, right? And this can be even, silly things. Right now, I'm wearing a T-shirt that is kind of a light blue color. Well, it's light blue to me because that's what I've been taught that color actually is. But to someone else, could they see that as a different color? And could I see their point of view in that as well? Or am I going to stick to, no, it's light blue and that's all there is to it? So anyway, the older I get, this is one of those more reflective episodes, to kind of go through. But again, if think about the words that are in that song, and the fact that you're still listening means there's something in this episode that you needed to hear. So what was it that you needed to hear today? And how can you make your life different starting today? By maybe asking yourself some different questions, by looking at things from different angles and different points of view. Because I know for myself personally, as I have gotten older, I have started to question more. I've started to look at multiple angles of some of these different things that sometimes I believed for a long time. And I find it to be very freeing to realize that you can see the world from both sides, and actually from both sides, it is a much more beautiful place to actually see. So with that, I'm going to call it wraps for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the podcast. Have a great rest of your day and week.